All right, everybody, today we are going to do your favorite type of optic testing, torture testing. Today we're going to torture test the Cyelee Optics Chameleon SRS8. All right, sweet, so let's talk stats about this optic. Currently it's available in red and green dot, but it is currently only available in an 8 MOA dot. Uses an RMR 407 507C footprint, which is super common, and uses a CR1632 battery, which gives us 50,000 hours of battery life. And it does utilize a top-mounted battery tray, which is great because then we don't have to worry about re-zeroing after we've replaced that battery. Does include the shake awake motion activation deactivation, and it is manufactured out of aircraft grade 7075 T6 aluminum. It uses a trademark STIG RS astigmatism relief system. It does have a huge picture window that's almost 1 inch by 1 inch squared, and that glass is parallax free. It has an IPX7 waterproof rating, but that's just waterproof rating, not dust rating, which we'll talk more about a little bit later on also. It has a 1 MOA per click of adjustment on windage and elevation, and it has 10 brightness settings, 8 of which are for daytime, 2 for night vision. Comes with a limited lifetime warranty, and it has an MSRP under $200 at $199.99 MSRP. All right, so let's talk about what's actually included in the box with this Cyelee Optics. One, cool patch. Your instruction manual, which is pretty well detailed reading through it. Yeah, I read instructions. You do get 2 of these cards, one of which is how to zero and at what distance. And then the next one is how to adjust your windage and elevation for that zero. You get a really nice cleaning cloth, a little sticker, of course, and you get a lot of screws with this. In fact, you get 10 sets of screws with 3 screws of each type, so a lot of mounting screws in there. You do get 2 wrenches for mounting and windage and elevation adjustment. We're going to talk a little bit more about those a little bit later. And then last but not least, of course, you get your optic. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of this optic that we discovered before we go into our torture test. And we have the ability to really do some pros and cons on here because this optic was actually placed on our range rental SIG P211 GTO right out the gate. And it's accumulated over 10,000 rounds with the general public using it. That in itself is a bit of a big torture test, giving it to the general public to use and abuse. And to be honest with you, it performed nearly flawless for those 10,000 plus rounds. And then I myself personally put about 1,000 rounds to this optic to get a good feel for it. So think about it. It's already got 11,000 rounds plus on this optic, and it seems to be going strong. Now, there was a little thing that we did notice is that the optic came loose a couple of times, or a few times, or many times, but I can't blame the optic for that. It could be the optic, it could be the mounting solution or mounting plate we used on the SIG, it could be the SIG, and it could be the screws. So I can't directly place blame on the optic for it. All right, let's talk about the pros that we found before the torture test. This thing has a really nice big picture window with super clear glass and a very, very crisp dot, which made it very fast and easy to find the dot no matter what we were trying to do with it. And this thing comes with a ton of screws. And I found that the more expensive the optic, the less stuff it comes with. And it utilizes a really good mounting pattern. Large brightness buttons, and they're on opposite sides of the optic. The thing has great battery life, very comparable to other higher end ones. And uses an IPX7 waterproof rating. It has 10 brightness settings, and it seems to be built pretty solid from what we tell so far. The glass, oddly enough, doesn't hold fingerprints, which is really cool. And the deep recessed lens gives it good protection, not only from stuff like this, but also from the sun. All right, so let's talk cons. It only has an 8 MOA dot, which if you know me, I'm not a fan of just an 8 MOA dot. It does have a tendency to sometimes overshadow your target, and it kind of hurts you when you're really trying to rein in some major precision shots. To be honest with you, this thing also kind of looks like a knockoff SRO or just a knockoff optic to begin with. It does sit very far forward, just like the SRO, which means it gets crap from the ejection port on the lens. And the windage and elevation adjusters click sometimes, and not well, or they're just too light, which causes me to blow past those ticks and do multiple clicks as I'm trying to adjust it. And the IPX7 is only a waterproof rating. There is no dust proof rating or any rating for dust and debris on it, which is a bit of a concern. And it can sit a little bit high on some guns, which makes that optic be a little bit harder to find if you're used to an optic that sits a little bit lower. And the last con I want to talk about are those wrenches that are included, that are there for adjustment of your windage and elevation and for mounting of the optic. They're awful, downright awful, and they will cause you to strip screws out. So while I can recommend using them to adjust your windage and elevation, I definitely do not recommend you use those to actually mount the optic and tighten those screws down, because there's a good chance it will strip out your screws. All right, and those are the pros and cons that we found before we got into our torture test. Now, let's go into our torture test. All right, so let's go into what our instruments of torture are and how we're gonna torture this optic. The first thing that we're gonna do is we are gonna start off by racking the optic off a 2x4 and then confirm 0. That's gonna simulate whether we have to use a barricade cover or concealment to put our gun into battery or to clear out a malfunction on it. Then we're gonna hit it multiple times with this 2x4 just to give it some blunt force trauma. Then we'll confirm 0 again. Then we're gonna take it one step up and we're gonna rack it off this metal drum. After we do that, we're gonna jump over to the cinder block, rack it a few times off our cinder block, and then next we're gonna drop it into a bucket of stones. And that's going to be to see if we scratch the lens or if just that trauma alone creates problems with that optic. Then the one that makes everybody cringe, myself included, is we're gonna hold our firearm upside down and drop it from about chest height directly down onto the optic, onto the cement, and then confirm 0. Last but not least, we are gonna drop the optic into our bucket of water. Well, it does have that IPX7 rating, so what we're trying to figure out is, did we open up any vulnerabilities in the rest of our testing where it's no longer IPX7 rated and we wound up creating a failure in the optic with the water? Now let's get to the test. All right, let's go ahead and start off with confirmation of 0, just to ensure that we're on and kind of see where we're patterning. All right, I'd say that's a really good confirmation of 0. Really nice, good, tight groups on that one. Sweet, let's torture. All right, so our first torture test is going to be the rack. We're gonna rack it off this 2x4. Now this is pine board, so it's fairly soft, but let's get a few good racks off of this and then we'll reconfirm 0. Ready? Here we go. All right, we gave it a few good hits. Let's go ahead and load it up and reconfirm our 0. Here we go. All right, I could see one of those was me. I felt it right on the trigger. It's that central low one. Other than that, they stayed with a really good grouping on there. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot lower or left and right than it did before. So I don't think we lost 0 in any way, shape, or form on this. Let's step it up a notch. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take that same 2x4 that we racked it off of, we're gonna smack it a few good times and then confirm our 0. Here we go. All right, let's see how it held up. I mean, not even any smudges to the paint or the coating that's on here. So far, so good. Glass is crystal clear, no cracks or anything like that. So let's shoot a few rounds off and confirm 0. All right, good confirmation of 0. Still staying in the same place as it was from original. Those are really good shots. We have done no harm to this optic yet. Sweet, so our next test is going to be racking it off of this steel reinforced rim of this metal drum. Oof. All right, it actually, the coating held up really well on here. That lens is pretty well recessed in here, so I didn't expect that to actually hit the glass. And the coating held up really, really well. We have no cracks forming, dot still seems nice, crisp, and clear. So it doesn't look like we did any damage, so let's go ahead and confirm our 0 and make sure that we're still maintaining a good positive 0. All right, good shots, decent grouping. I can't say that we lost 0 yet. It's still holding pretty darn true to what it was before. Let's carry on. All right, let's go to our next one, the cinder block rack. Ooh, all right. I mean, it did exactly what we expected. It chewed up the front face of this. It did kind of have this bit of a convex to it, so I knew it was gonna kind of chew those portions up of it first. It ate a lot of that coating off of it, but doesn't really seem to damage the aluminum all that much. So they're using a good quality of aluminum on there. If we look through the glass, we have no chips, no scratches, and no cracks. Dot looks nice, crisp, and clear, and everything seems like it's pretty well laid out as far as center on it. So let's go ahead and confirm 0 on our targets and see if that did anything to it. Great grouping, solid confirmation of 0 still. So not an issue yet with this thing. Let's keep going. Huh, impressive. All right, so the next test we're gonna do is drop it in a bucket of limestone. And this has multiple different things that we're testing on this one. 1, will it survive being dropped directly on top of it on the limestone? 2, will those limestone rocks get in here and scratch up the glass on the lens? Last but not least, remember, this is IPX7 rated, which is only waterproof, not dust and debris proof. So will some of that stuff inhibit this optic and cause it to fail? So let's give it a couple of drops and see how it does. All good hits. All right. All right, well, it's definitely dusty and dirty. Dot still seems good. No cracks in the lens. No scratching. And all it did was just kind of nick the coating a little bit on the top. No dents or anything like that. So visually, everything looks like it held up just fine. So let's go ahead and take a few shots and confirm 0. All right, so I wasn't real happy with the way that grouping turned out, and I couldn't tell whether that was me or a little bit of a change in the 0. So I'm gonna slow it down, focus a little bit more on it. We're gonna throw 4 more shots at it. All right, much better grouping on that one. So that was my fault, not the optic's fault. We're still getting a good consistent group on here. No loss of 0 yet. All right, so the next test that we're gonna do is the one that makes everybody cringe, us included, is we're gonna drop it straight onto the optic from about chest height onto the concrete floor. Now, you will notice that we added, let's call it some padding or protection on the front of this gun. And that's because this gun is extremely nose heavy, which means when we drop it, I'm worried it's gonna hit the sights on this thing first, and it's not my gun, so I don't wanna damage the gun, only the optic. All right, here we go. Oh, that was a good, oh, we broke it. We broke it. I was hoping we weren't going to, but we completely dented in the hood here, which means it actually hit here first, but we completely broke the lens apart. There's a huge crack coming down the middle angularly, bunch of big cracks at the top, and I'm pretty sure, oh yeah, we took chunks of the glass out of it, but the dot is still there. The dot is still vibrant and strong. So I have a feeling it's still shootable, but did it retain 0 after we broke this thing? Let's untape it and shoot it and see how we did. All right, after that epic concrete drop test, let's go ahead and confirm 0. Actually, I'm impressed. The grouping stayed tight where it was. We were seeing the same basic patterning. It didn't lose 0 at all. So we broke the glass, we didn't lose 0. Let's jump on to the last test. All right, so let's do the last part of our test, and that is the water test. We're gonna drop this into this bucket of water here to see if we opened up any vulnerabilities in that IPX7 rating. Because remember, IPX7 is a waterproof rating up to 3 meters, if I'm not mistaken. So we're gonna put it in about 1.5 feet of water. We're gonna leave it in there, and we're gonna let it sit in there for a while, and then we'll see if we wound up opening anything up during our testing. Here we go. Bombs away. All right, let's leave it in there and see how she does. All right, sweet. So we've let this sit for quite some time in the water to see if we open up any vulnerabilities in that IPX7 rating. So moment of truth, let's go ahead and take it out and see if we still have an optic. We still have a dot. It's crisp, it's clear. It's there, it's functioning just fine. So we didn't open up any vulnerabilities in this through all of that testing that we did. It's still there and alive. So let's put this thing together, shake it off, and do some confirmation shots. See how we do. Sweet. All right, let's go ahead and confirm 0 after we let it sit in that bucket of water. See how she does. Oh, it got all over my glasses. All right, looks like we've got really good grouping. It did migrate just a tick low compared to the other shots, but I can't really tell you exactly what that was, but the grouping itself was really good, so I don't feel like it lost 0 in any way. So I say confirm. So what are our final impressions of the Cyelee Optic? Well, let's first start from the aspect of the torture test. Well, it failed the torture test. After we dropped it directly onto the top of it, it broke the glass, and it broke the glass a lot, but it still did keep a dot, and it kept 0 through all of this. And that IPX7 stayed good and tight and didn't allow that water to penetrate and to damage the optic even further where it was unusable. I would say, based on the groupings, it's still a usable optic even though it was cracked. Could we still use it? Yes. Was it still accurate? It was. So I would say it failed, but it kind of won in some ways, shape, or form. Now let's just talk about it as a whole. I actually think it's a pretty decent optic for the price. In fact, would it make a good optic for competition use because of its big window and its other features? Yeah, it'd be a cool optic or a really good optic for competition use. And it would be a great optic as a range toy. If you just see competing with it or shooting with that optic on the range, I think it works just fine. In fact, let's talk about how it's gone over 11,000 rounds through this thing without a hiccup. And after all that testing, I noticed that the optic didn't loosen up and our witness marks didn't change on here. So I cannot say that this optic had anything to do with it coming loose on the setup that we had before. I don't think it was this optic's fault or its screw's fault because we didn't see that failure. Is it a good optic for the money? Absolutely. Would I put it on one of my guns? Yeah, probably. If I knew that that gun was just going to see some competition use or some range use, yeah, I wouldn't have any problem recommending this optic for it. Did it have some pros and some cons? It did, but I feel like with this, aside from the torture test, the pros kind of outweighed the cons. Another important note that I want to talk about is that Cyelee sent this optic to us, meaning most likely they watched some of our torture test videos and said, yeah, we're going to send you this optic. Do your best or your worst, depending on how you look at it, to the optic because we think that it'll hold up to a majority of your testing. And it absolutely did. It just failed in the one part. But again, not critical failure where it was unusable. So hats off to Cyelee not only for making a decent product, but for also sending this out knowing what we were going to do to this optic. I'm really happy to tell you guys about my own personal podcast called Trigger Happy Tactical Podcast. You can listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts, including right here on YouTube. It's just another great way to get some really fun and cool firearms related content for you. So if you get a chance, check me out at Trigger Happy Tactical Podcast. There is a link in the description below. Thank you everybody for watching this video and making it all the way to the end here. We hope you had just as much fun watching this video as we definitely did making this one. It was fun, right? As usual, you can check out all the links to our socials down below. And don't forget to give this video a like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you later.